Weekly open for Bitcoin, and this one is, well, rather interesting as Bitcoin does close below last week's open, as you can see right here. And of course, to open up this week, Bitcoin trading below 58,000 bucks, kind of getting more and more comfortable, I suppose, below the $60,000 pivot. However, when Bitcoin opens up a week, in this case, below that red 5 exponential moving average, I would be cognizant that there can very easily be, a rally attempt around that number, which would be somewhere around 59,000 and change, like 59,500 or so, perhaps at most. But if you are bearish, Bitcoin does now have the weekly trend officially to the downside yet again, with all lower lows and lower highs following through, as Bitcoin has closed lower than the low that was in late July here before that August, or what day was it? August 5th dump. Yeah, that's the one. And putting in, another lower high over here. So if you are bearish, like this first 2 to 3 weeks spread of September is going to be the time to be, well, in my opinion, defensive, with price action perhaps coming, actually breaking down here. In this particular case, you can still, argue that this is a range, I suppose, but with the trend, starting to become at least more and more friendly to the bears, I would express a lot of concern for that, as well as the September statistics that we've gone over in the past couple of videos, understanding that September traditionally is a bearish month, especially within the first 2 to 3 weeks, about 14 to day number 19, 20, somewhere around there is where we would expect the damage to be coming from, historically speaking. And then after that time, actually, is typically a bit of a relief time. So again, just kind of getting my thoughts out on the greater scale of things, between now and then, very likely dangerous. However, after that time, if Bitcoin can still hold within this range, really not breaking to new lows, that would be a really, really good signal for Bitcoin continuing to the upside. But until that happens, you're going to hear me have a more bearish tone, as we've been speaking about. That just is what it is, sir. It is what it is. And from there, we can get into some momentum. And momentum charts are, well, not opening up great to start this week. Again, correlating very, very well with the idea here that if there is going to be downside, we do see it in this early portion of September. We can see that weekly stochastic momentum has opened up yet again to the downside, or not yet again, but is going to reject going into the bullish control zone and turn to the downside as long as Bitcoin is closing this next week on CME below 62,400. Of course, this is in combination with the monthly, which is also continuing down, as we went over in yesterday's video, as long as Bitcoin's below 64,500. So if Bitcoin could reclaim 64,500 by the end of September, I mean, that would actually be a pretty damn good signal, to be honest with you. But moving on from there, and just going down the board, 5-day time frame also can, kind of confirming what we saw on the weekly, downside momentum getting rejected from the neutral zone, 64,600 going to be the pivot right there. Should also be aware that there is actually a trend line regression coming in from some of the last few major lows from July of 2022, September of 2022, and again in September of 2023. But that would obviously imply that these next 1, 2, maybe 3 periods would continue to the downside, thus fulfilling a trend line test right there. 2-day time frame is also going to be turning fresh down as long as Bitcoin's below 58,850. That one closing actually not tonight, but on Wednesday. And then the daily time frame is obviously nosediving here as well, as long as Bitcoin's below 64,200. So again, we're seeing all higher term timeframes align with each other, plus trend, plus September statistics. Again, I'm going to be more certainly defensive. If there is going to be a breakdown, it very likely happens between now and kind of like the 3rd week of this month. Also, on top of that, of course, we have gone over this, that the daily setup over here for the downside is very much still active. We can see that this trade entered in at 62,850. This one is obviously going to close when Bitcoin closes above the 5 exponential, which is 58,500. And, as long as Bitcoin's below there, this trade is going to be open and it's going to continue to, well, and, theoretically it's going to continue to the downside. It's not like the best setup long-term. I'm not a humongous fan of this equity curve, but what I did think was interesting is that if we go over here to the 2-day time frame, not changing anything on this strategy at all, the results actually, in my opinion, a lot better as far as the equity curve goes, just because that equity curve really maintains a nice steady up and to the right sort of trajectory and even a higher percent profitable rate right here. I'm curious, however, what the average winning trade has returned on this one. And this one has been just under 12% for the average winning trade. For the average losing trade, losing an average of about 5.25%. A little bit more than that. So very unlikely that this one's going to be a loser because, well, it's already, well in profit. But I'm curious if it were to hit the average win return, where would that put Bitcoin? That would put Bitcoin actually back down around very low $50,000, 52,000 and change perhaps, for that, if it does play that out. I'm also curious how long it typically takes to play out these trades. Let's just see. Let's go back to the performance summary right here. And the average amount of bars and winning trades is 4. This is a 2-day time frame, so that'd be 8 days from entry, which was Monday, the 26th of August, so last Monday. So actually, this would be theoretically closing relatively soon. Perhaps it does, and it will if Bitcoin goes back above about 59,400 or so. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into some daily price statistics. Monday actually is more likely to close positively than negatively, and perhaps Monday actually does provide the impetus for a bit of a bounce here, as almost 63% of all Mondays since 2024 began have closed positively for an average return of 3.33. On the losing side, for those 37% of losing Mondays, lost an average of 240, almost 2.5%. So I'm curious what that would look like in terms of price action. To the upside, 330 would put Bitcoin actually back above 59,000 bucks. That could be your reconnect that we spoke about at the beginning of this video. And to the downside, if it were to shave off about 240, that'd put Bitcoin back down around about 56,000 bucks. Doesn't really do anything for me on either side, to be honest with you. It's still just overall, range plays, I suppose, if you're on the lower term timeframes, doesn't really, initiate any sort of trend breakages to either side. I mean, if anything, it would be continuation of the downside, obviously, but we're kind of splitting hairs here, to be honest with you. There's not too much to be aware of on this particular Monday, although Monday is the most volatile day since 2024 began. So I guess if there is going to be a move to the downside, Monday is a good day. That is when we saw the last major dump, which was August 5th on a Monday as well, the one-day bear market of 2024. But does that continue on is the real question now. As we go over here into the HPDR ranges, I do want to say that the HPDR ranges on the daily time frame showing a lower block actually between about 56,500 to the downside versus 59,350 to the upside. So actually correlating quite well with that, with those daily statistics right there. So unlikely to see anything like of significance today, I suspect. Maybe test down here, maybe a test over here. Ultimately, I would just be looking for boundaries there. Perhaps there's a bit of a scalp play on the other side for the short-term time frame scalpers around those regions. But going over here to the weekly, do we see anything of interest? We do see that Bitcoin is basing off of the 61.8 level. That does imply that if Bitcoin does close below this, which is 57,300 by end of week, that is going to likely initiate the next leg to the downside. CME more or less showing the same thing. So I would be running with that as my major assumption. Until proven otherwise, actually. So again, these next couple of weeks likely going to be the big weeks. If you are bearish, we would be expecting downside between now and again the third week of September. If Bitcoin fails to break down between now and that date, you will hear me turn to a more bullish tune. But right now, in my opinion, is the time to be defensive, and it's just going to be a bit of a waiting game. So I think I forgot to actually mention this on this particular video because I actually will post this a little bit later. This is actually being recorded on a live stream right now, but we are having a sale for all of our programs and services on our Teachable School, which is found in the link in the description below with the code BDAY in all capitals. And you can even get the Krown Quant automation service for for $30, which is 80% off on your first payment, meaning that you can set up automated trades based off of strategies like this, or really whatever the fuck you can figure out on TradingView with the indicators that you have access to. Of course, we also have what's it called, like templates that you can build off of. But ultimately, people find the most success when they're actually doing their own thing with this, as you would expect. I mean, everyone's going to have different strategies. So yeah, that is going to do it for today's video, and we will now go back to the live stream. So I'll stop recording right